Hi everyone! So today's video is actually going to be on Jen's top 10 and I'm going to focus on trees this time. I'll do other top 10 videos on shrubs and perennials, but for today we're just going to focus on trees. I get a ton of questions about which trees should I plant where, and in particular which small trees I should plant. I have a lot of people asking me for trees in very small spaces. They either live in condo or townhouses, or they have a really small yard, and so not a lot of space, and they don't want a gigantic tree that is going to cause problems later. So I'm going to give sort of a smattering of different size trees and trees that perform different functions in the ecosystem. Everything I will suggest is going to be native to the Mid-Atlantic area. If you would like a list for your area and you're in a different spot, let me know and I'll come up with a list that's specific to your location. So right out of the gate, I'm going to start with oaks, and my favorite oak is actually a swamp white oak, and I'm standing underneath a swamp white oak, and this one was really only planted maybe a few years ago, and it's already about 20 feet tall. They grow pretty fast for oaks. It has a nice pyramidal shape. One of the other really cool things about them is that they have fuzzy backed leaves. I love fuzzy leaves for a very good reason. That means it's tomentose, and tomentose means it collects particulate matter in the air. So if you live in a particularly polluted area, try to find a hairy-leaved tree. And if you have enough space for an oak, a swamp white oak is a really good option for you. Now they do get pretty tall, maybe about 60 to 70 feet tall when they're fully grown, but that does take a while, and maybe about 30 feet wide. So, but they are really great what I call picnic trees, so they're really excellent at providing a lot of shade. They're really good at saving you a lot of money on your energy bills if you plant them on the south or west side of your house. They do provide a lot of great food for the critters, and if you saw my previous video where I talked about some of the books I really like, the one by Doug Tallamy discusses the benefits of oaks, and one of the things that I love about oaks is that as a genus, as a group, they support more than 500 species of lepidopterans, and that's butterflies and moths. So that's pretty good in my book, because that means lots of food for birds and other critters. So that's only the butterflies and moths. It doesn't include the jays. Blue jays love oaks because the acorns are really good. Of course, squirrels, and we have all sorts of other little critters that enjoy them as well. They also make excellent homes for a lot of birds and other wildlife. So for my money, I would always plant an oak if I had the space. So that's the number one tree, is oak. I'm going kind of not in the same, most people go from 10 to 1, but I'm gonna go from 1 to 10, and the rest are in no particular order. I'm just gonna put them in as I find them, but oak is always gonna be my number one species. Well, my number one genus, I should say, and you can take your pick as to which one you'd like to have in your yard and which one fits. All right, on to the next one. It's really bright today, so we're gonna go ahead and get the second tree out of the way. This is also a really big tree. They can get over 100 feet tall, and I like to use them as sort of the top tier. If you have space to build a forest, you can use these as your tallest trees and then create a ladder down from there with smaller trees, sort of laddering down. Tulip poplars are really excellent trees for providing shade. Like I said, they get to be about 100 to 110 feet tall. They have this really cool cat head shaped leaf. See that? In the spring, they develop flowers that look like tulips. They're actually in the magnolia family, so don't be fooled, it is not a poplar at all, it's actually a magnolia. And then in the fall, they create these little woody seeds that fall to the ground that were in the shape of a tulip, but then they just kind of fall apart. It has a green duckbill shaped bud over the winter. It's not fuzzy like other magnolias, but it does look like other magnolias, the bud does. And you can see the striations beginning on the bark here. I think this is one of the coolest parts. As they get older, they'll have these white striations in there, and it's almost like a diamond check pattern. It's really, really cool. And as they get older, those get wider. Tulip poplars are really known for growing tall and straight. They don't usually have a lot of curves or bends. If you grow them in an open field though, they may start to branch a lot lower than they normally would, but that's not a bad thing. It just is growing in a different place. Tulip poplars love full sun just like oaks do. Something's poking me. And again, they're really great for a large landscape. Try not to plant them near a structure. They tend to get aphids, and the aphids drop honeydew on cars and things. So just a heads up, put it in a field somewhere where it has an opportunity to get really big and do its thing. So on to number 3. Okay, number 3 is actually one of my favorite trees. It is the pawpaw, and it sort of has a tropical look. It's right behind me, you can see that. The leaves are very tropical looking. They're really large. And this will get fruit on it. It usually bears fruit sometime in August, September, depends on the weather. The flowers come out in May, and they're sort of a maroon purple color, and then they disappear, and of course the fruit hangs off here. Now if you can get to the fruit before the animals do, it's delicious. It's also called the Indiana banana or the poor man's banana. It's really rich in vitamins, and was one of the fruits that Native Americans ate and even our ancestors ate to provide them with a lot of nutrients. So this particular tree actually can survive to zone 4. So if you are down in that zone, you're able to grow this all the way down to Florida. So it has a pretty big range. It's grown in, typically it likes moist soils. It doesn't get too terribly large, and it does have this sort of spindly look when it's grown in a forested setting. It can grow in the shade, but if you grow it in the full sun, it will become a nice pretty tree, getting up to about 20 feet tall or so. If it's grown in the sun, you likely will get more production out of it, but you do need to grow it in groves. You have to have multiples in order for it to produce, and it's best if you can find varieties from different places. Don't go digging one up, you can find them online, but if you can find varieties, different cultivars, that's your best bet to get a really great crop. But they do like to grow in groves, so make sure you have enough space to plant 5 to 10 of them and get yourself a nice little, I don't know if it would be called an orchard, maybe it's an orchard of pawpaws, going. They will start to produce maybe about year 3 to 5 if you have them in the sun. So at any rate, this is a really great tree. It's a lot of fun to watch grow. It just comes on so fast in the spring. The leaves just unfurl so quickly, and it doesn't it just doesn't look like it belongs because it's such a tropical looking plant, but it does just fine here. So on to number 4. All right, so here's number 4, the Eastern red cedar. I like cedars because they provide an evergreen hedge if you need it, some northern wind protection if that's what you're looking for. They also are really, really excellent for birds. Their little berries actually serve as a great food source for our birds. So right behind me, this is the Eastern red cedar, and you can see the foliage changes from when it's young to as it gets older. The young foliage is often really spiny, and then as it gets older, it looks kind of like that. And it will develop little blue berries on it. Like I said, this is actually a really great tree for habitat as well as food for our critters. Now I like it because it provides some screening. I have a small one in my yard, and Eastern red cedars are actually fairly slow growing, so try and find the biggest stalk you can. Don't go too crazy, but just keep in mind that they are going to grow fairly slowly. So they will get big though. They can get, you know, 40 feet tall or so, but that'll take a while to get that tall. The other thing to know about cedars is that if you plant a cedar and you're trying to grow any crops in the prunus genus, like service berries, apples, hawthorns, crab apples, any of those, you're going to deal with cedar apple rust, cedar hawthorn rust, cedar serviceberry rust, all those things. They transfer between, it transfers between the cedar and those trees. So every other year you'll find these really weird orangey blobs on the cedar or the other tree. So in my case, I actually chose not to have a serviceberry in my yard, though I'd love to have one. I don't think that I can have both because the space I have to plant them is too close together. So I do have a serviceberry up on the hill that was a volunteer, I didn't put it in, and so far it looks okay. But I just know that in the future I might deal with some rust on both of them. They may transfer that back and forth. So just be mindful when you're selecting trees, especially with the cedars and the serviceberries, hawthorns, apples, crab apples, that kind of stuff, because it will have that cedar, I'll just call it cedar apple rust, cedar whatever rust. There's a different category of it that transfers back and forth. So really excellent tree to choose, but again, you have to make choices. On to the next. Okay, so here's number 5. This is an eastern redbud. There are western redbuds too, so if you're in that area, you could get one of these as well. It's got heart-shaped leaves, and it's a fairly small tree. It's what we call an edge species, so it likes to live on the edge of forests. It doesn't really like to be out in the middle of full sun all the time. It'll get baked, but it does like to live on the edges. You'll see them on roadsides a lot, at the edge of that forested area. It likes to have a little bit of protection, but it doesn't need a ton. So it's not an understory species, it's what we would call an edge species. They don't tend to live very long, but they're a very hardy, tolerant tree. They sometimes will split apart, so be cautious of getting one with stems that are branching too low and have a V-shaped crotch. We don't want to look at that because the problem is they split too easily. I'll do another video on how to select trees. Maybe that would be helpful for you guys. If it is, tell me, because I'm happy to go to nursery centers and pick out the right trees for you and show you what to look for. Again, it has heart-shaped leaves, it has a zigzag shaped stem, and then it has little sort of lavender colored flowers in the spring. Those are edible, by the way. You can throw them on a salad. And then in the fall, late summer, fall, it will start to develop these little bean pods, and they're about this long. And sometimes they're prolific and sometimes it's not. So just be aware that it will produce those bean pods, and they may make a lot of junk for you to clean up. Some people don't care. Some people are very worried about that kind of stuff. So if you are, maybe the redbud's not a great choice for you. However, I do really like them. They're very pretty trees, and they have a really unique character. So that's why they're on the list. On to the next one. Okay, so number 6 is a serviceberry, and unfortunately this year has been really awful to the serviceberries and a lot of our fruit-bearing trees because of the moisture. So a lot of these serviceberries have rust on them already. This is not cedar apple rust. This is a different kind of rust, and it's damaging all the fruits. So they're not going to be usable for a lot of the critters, though I haven't seen it on a lot of other berries. So like the winterberry hollies and the aronias, the chokeberries are fine, the elderberries look fine too. So it's just these serviceberries that seem to be affected. But I do love serviceberries. There's some really cool stories about serviceberries. These guys get to be about 15 to 20 feet high. They're typically multi-branching. You can find single stem varieties, but their normal habit is actually multi-stemmed. So the the name serviceberry is interesting. It comes from, so way back when, if someone died in the winter, they would have to wait until spring to bury their dead. And when the serviceberries bloom, which is a little white star-shaped bloom, when they come out, it means that the ground is workable enough to bury the dead, the people that have died over the winter. It's kind of sad, but that's one of the reasons why it's called a serviceberry. But it's also called a shad bush because when the flowers bloom, the shad are running up the river. And then the third thing it's called is a Juneberry, and that's because the purple blue berries actually come out in June. So this is the right month for them. This is June, and they should be ripening by the end of the month, but these are not going to go anywhere because they're full of rust. So unfortunately these are not going to be edible, and this has been this way last year and this year. The crop has looked the same because of our precipitation, unfortunately. Now they do have a neat little serrated leaf, very similar to a cherry. Their stems are usually light gray in color, and like I said, it gets to be about 15 to 20 feet tall. It's a really neat little tree, a little landscape tree, and if you can deal with a little bit of rust, they're actually really pretty in the spring. They're one of the first things to bloom in the spring, and they produce berries when not a lot of other things are producing. So that's the serviceberry. On to the next one. Okay, I just had to change up because I found this absolutely lovely American beech. Beeches are actually one of my favorite trees. I call them climbers because they're so easy to climb. They have scaffold branches that stick 90 degrees out from their trunks, making them super easy to climb. They're also the tree that everybody carves their initials into because the bark is really it's really thin and smooth, and kind of looks like elephant legs. That's sort of how I describe it. Beeches have really just, you know, pretty leaves. They have like wavy edges. Now this is an American beech. The European beech looks a little bit different. There are different varieties. There's a copper beech, which is purple. So the American beech I really like. It does produce a little nut, and it is valuable for wildlife, so if you're going for that, they will come for the nuts. In the fall, it'll get a cigar-shaped bud, and it will hang on to that throughout the winter, of course. Now it does hang on to its leaves. It's what we call marcescent, and that means it does hang on to its leaves throughout the winter. So they're very easy to spot in the woods because they're the only ones really hanging on to their leaves in any significant way. And it's sort of like a tan beige color, and they make a lot of noise. They rustle in the wind. I guess that's number 7. The beech actually gets pretty big, but it's a very slow grower. So if you have space, you might want to try one. They will grow in the shade. They like a little bit of shade, so if you have a tulip poplar, say, plant one of these guys underneath it, and you might end up with a really neat canopy over time. So on to number 8. Okay, here's number 8. This is one of the coolest trees and very underused, I think, in the landscape. It's an American hornbeam, and it's got these really cool, this is the flower for it right here. It's a really neat looking cluster of flowers, and they're green, they blend right in. Yeah, that's it. That's all it looks like. So there's not a lot of stuff dropping from this tree. It has sort of a flaky bark. This one has sort of flaky bark. It's a smaller tree, so it tends to get maybe about 20, 25, maybe 30 feet. It does like a little bit of shade. It does not like to torch in the sun. They even have been found in growing in the understory of forests. So if you have only a shaded spot to put it, this would be a good choice for that. It doesn't produce a lot of junk, and it's also a small tree in stature. It has a really neat form. It starts branching fairly low. I don't even know if I can capture it. And and it's fairly wide. So if you need something to provide a lot of shade, you can prune up the bottom limbs as it's growing, but I just like to leave them. It's really great habitat for birds and other critters. So that is number 8, I think. Okay, so here's number 8, and this is actually one of my favorite trees. It is a Sweetbay Magnolia. I had to come to one of my favorite garden centers, Stadler, to actually find one. I don't know of that many people who are planting them, although they're becoming more and more popular. They're a little airier than the southern magnolia with the really thick leaf. They're semi-evergreen in the mid-Atlantic area, but the farther south you go, they'll be a little bit more evergreen. And they do have the fragrant white flowers. This one's just about to pop. So it is a magnolia, so it will have the fragrant flowers. They're not as big as the southern magnolia, but they are just as pretty, and they smell just as nice. They take a little while to get their legs, but once they do, they come in. They're very, very pretty trees. You can use them as part of an evergreen hedge. I wouldn't use probably all sweet bays. I would mix them in with other things. So they're really excellent as a sidekick to some of the other ones. On to the next one. Okay, so here's number 9. I'm still at the nursery center because I couldn't find one of these on my travels that I liked well enough. This is a Winter King Hawthorne. Hawthorns are fantastic for birds. If you want to attract birds to your yard, I highly recommend a Hawthorne. The leaves are this real pretty shape. See that? And they also produce these, right now they're still green, but they will turn sort of an orangey color in the fall, and they're fantastic for birds. Some varieties still have thorns, which are an excellent hiding place for birds, so that's another thing. This tree provides both food and habitat. So on to the last one, if I can find it. Okay, so to wrap up, every tree is my favorite tree, clearly. It is Jen's top 10. And also I can't count, clearly. So, yeah, so I gave you 10. My last one, number 11, your bonus, is actually a crabapple. I really, really love crabapples, and I think it's because they have beautiful pink flowers, most of them, and I just really love the color punch that they provide in the spring. And yes, they provide food for birds, but I think it's really just that welcome punch of pink in the spring that, you know, it's a really just a nice thing to see early in the spring. Another thing I need to note is that I said that cedar apple rust was anything with the Prunus genus, and that's incorrect. I actually meant Rosaceae, so that's the family, and it doesn't affect all of them, but it does affect a lot of them. Serviceberry is Amelanchier, and there's all different species of Amelanchier, and it's just, I just want you all to be aware of those kinds of things when you pick trees out, that you know sort of what you're in for when you get them. But so do a little bit of research. Sorry about that mistake. That was something I caught when I was editing. I said, oh, that's wrong. Those aren't right. That's not right. As a family, Rosaceae is pretty big. It includes things like raspberries and, you know, cherry trees, and it's gigantic. It's a huge family. So anyway, and not all of them are affected, but a lot of them are. So anyway, I will be working on a top 10 shrubs and a top 10 perennials as well. I don't think I'm gonna do like a grasses. I think I'll throw some grasses into the perennials, maybe. If there's something in particular that you just want to know about, you want me to do a quick video on, please shoot me an email. I am happy to answer any of your questions, and if I can make a video about it, I certainly will. And again, if you are interested in this kind of stuff and want to keep getting notifications, please subscribe to the channel. That really helps me out, because right now this is a brand new channel, so I'd really love to see what people are interested in watching and what you all need help with, because that's why I'm here. So with that, I'll just say happy gardening.